Hi, I'm Sarah from veganchickpea.com, and I'm delighted to be here today with Kevin, one of the co-founders of beeboys.org and a local honey and beeswax producer here on the big island of Hawaii. Kevin, thank you so much for being here with me today. It really feels like a privilege to get to connect with you and bring some education to the audience at home about this really important topic.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Awesome. Yeah. So before we dive in, I just want to set the stage for briefly here for some people watching at home who might not know about the hot debate around honey in the vegan community. So honey technically is not vegan because it's an animal, or in this case, an insect byproduct that often in the mass production of it harms the bees and is considered exploitation. So most vegans would fall into a camp of saying, absolutely not, honey's not okay to consume because of the exploitation, and it's very black and white to them. Yet at the same time, there's this growing population of other vegans who consider themselves vegan and live to the lifestyle, except that they do consume local, raw, sustainable honey. Much to the dismay of the first group who say, that's not okay, you can't call yourself a vegan. So it is can be a pretty heated debate sometimes in the vegan world. So I'd love to start with that topic in mind because you consider yourself a vegan in all ways, right? Except that you not only consume honey, you produce it. And you coined yourself with a very clever term called beegan, right? Which is B-E-E-G-A-N instead of vegan. So I'd love for you to just talk about what being a vegan means to you.
Yeah, for sure. So veganism, or it's broader than just veganism because it's having an awareness of how our food's created, not just looking at honeybees as honey producers, but essential actors in our food systems. A lot of vegans will consume food that has been pollinated and made possible by honeybees. So prime example is the almond crop in California. You have 80% of the bees in the United States packed on the back of tractor trailers and transported to the almond orchards. 50% of those die every year because when the honeybees are out there pollinating, the orchard tenders are spraying fungicide and pesticides and herbicides on the ground, and the honeybees are getting that all over themselves. And the honeybees, they're interesting where their immune system is fungus-based, where our immune system is bacteria-based in our gut. They have fungus, beneficial fungus in the hive that help them to detoxify. So if you're spraying with pesticides, then they'll go in and they can somewhat detoxify. But when you spray them with a fungicide to save the almond blossoms from rot or whatever, you're killing the bee's immune system. And that's where a lot of the stressor comes and kills the hive. Not to mention the high fructose corn syrup, the brewer's yeast, and all the other chemicals they're feeding the bees. They just don't survive all those stressors. And then what they do is they take the bees after they've done all that, the pollination service, that the farmers are paying as beekeepers. They take them back to North Dakota or wherever they are, and they harvest that honey, and then it's sold as grade A.
Oh my gosh.
USDA grade A honey.
Oh, that's awful.
So do not eat that.
No way.
Without that, there would not be almond milk, there would not be almond butter, there would not be all those almond byproducts. So almonds are a byproduct of honeybees too. So what I do is we have an ethical way we keep the honeybees because it's important for us. We're gardeners too. That's how we started. Honeybees are essential for pollinating all the fruits and vegetables that we eat. And the regular omnivore, 33% of their food is dependent upon the honeybee.
Wow.
Vegans, a lot more of our food is dependent upon the honeybee. So that's kind of why we take that approach of stewardship of the honeybees, and not just looking at honeybees as honey producers or wax producers, but an essential part of our food systems.
Awesome, great. So is the the honeybee is endangered. Is that correct? That they're in decline?
They're in decline. I wouldn't say they're endangered yet, but
Okay.
they're in decline,
Mm-hmm.
and it's because of our food systems. I mentioned the almonds, and then I'll also mention citrus and blueberries and strawberries. If you go to a farm, you have a monoculture, which is just strawberries or whatever crop that they're growing, so that economies of scale, they have everything set up so it's streamlined and everything's done efficiently. And part of that, they kill all of the other weeds, and then they ship in honeybees to pollinate them because there aren't any native pollinators that can survive in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And the honeybees also can't survive in that situation. That's why they get shipped in and shipped out. And when they're fed high fructose corn syrup and brewer's yeast because of their lack of food that they can gather from whatever they're pollinating. Certain crops have more nectar and pollen than others, but almonds, for example, are one that has limited nectar source and pollen source, so they have to supplement. And that's a very not hospitable way to keep bees. So I don't agree with consuming their honey or their wax or anything from that. That's kind of like it's factory farming.
Mm-hmm.
Be it a cow or a tree. It's all factory farming, and it's not ethical and it's not sustainable. So that's where I think it's very important that the vegan community were to open their minds a bit, not get so militant about it, and understand that honeybees are pollinating our food.
Mm-hmm.
Without them, we wouldn't have our food. So we need to embrace them, and we need to be protectors of the honeybees.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what my role I feel is like a protector of the honeybee and trying to raise awareness amongst not just vegans but the general population about how our food is actually created, and that honeybees play that essential role of pollinator.
Yeah, I love that point because I know I've been a vegan for a couple of years now that it's not really talked about. It's just like, no, it's not okay to consume honey, kind of end of story, no matter what. It seems very black and white. And yet there really is this other point that you bring in of the food that we eat as humans, but especially as vegans, needs the honeybee in order to thrive and even survive. So I love that you're bringing voice to that other lesser known perspective. And so on that note, you're saying you don't agree with honey on the mass scale, the production of it, because it is cruelty and exploitation.
Yeah.
So on your smaller scale, the local farm that you have here in Hawaii, how do you feel that what you do here helps save the bees and be a steward to them versus harming them?
So conventional beekeepers, and I'm putting in there organic beekeepers as well, they use plastic frames in their hives. And they'll when they harvest honey, they harvest full boxes at a time, which kills lots of honeybees. It's very destructive to the colony. It's a huge stressor on the colony. And then they'll take those frames and they put them through an extractor, which is a centrifugal force. It takes out all the honey, and then it leaves the comb on the wax frame, and then they put that back onto the hive for the honeybees to build again. And that's organic and conventional beekeeping. They do that.
Wow.
Well, what we do is, and there's all sorts of problems associated with that. The bioaccumulation of pesticides in that wax and all that bad stuff. But what we do is we do what we call regenerative sustainable beekeeping. So part of the bee's life cycle is wax production. They gorge themselves on honey, and then they have these glands in between the colors of the black and yellow, where they secrete plates of wax. And then the bees will take that and mold it into the hexagon shapes, and they do what's called festooning. They use gravity and basically hold hands and create the design for the comb that they're going to make. And that's like how they measure it. And then they make their honeycomb, and then when we harvest, we cut all of that wax out as well as the honeycomb. And what we'll do is we'll put together just the comb wax and sell that for liquid honey. And then we also incorporate it into our beeswax products, because we have so much beeswax. And so there's also 1 pound of beeswax requires 10 pounds of honey to create. So we don't end up with as much honey as an organic or conventional beekeeper. And then there's the point of, okay, well, can't you just leave the honeybees alone and let them do their thing and let them, have their honey because it's theirs. They worked really hard on it.
Yeah.
And I wish that were the case, but now we have, because of globalization, we have varroa mite destructor, which came from, I forget, Asia or Africa, and then we have the small hive beetle. That same thing came from one of those two continents. And because they're here on the island, they came about 8 years ago, and they killed about 80% of the colonies on the island. So we personally lost all of our colonies. And what happens is there's also like a natural ebb and flow of the population in the beehive. When there's a lot of nectar and pollen to be collected, there's a high population. When the nectar goes away and the pollen isn't as plentiful, the population naturally declines. The queen won't lay as many eggs. So with that ebb and flow of population comes how many bees are actually in the hive able to manage their stores of honey. And when there's excess stores of honey that the bees aren't able to manage on a cycle of low population, the hive beetles can come in and ruin that honey. They'll lay their eggs in there, and their larva crawls through, and we call it sliming out. That honey will ferment and just spill out of the honeycomb and just destroy the hive. It will kill the hive. So honeybees need human interaction to survive, and not the type of human interaction that conventional organic beekeepers do, but more of a interaction that puts the honeybee first, and their essential role in not just our food systems, but their essential role in our ecosystem too. That they have their sting, that burn that you feel when they sting us. It's formic acid, and that is in any healthy ecosystem you will have stinging insects, a high population of stinging insects. And honeybees are one of those stinging insects. So when you have a healthy forest ecosystem, you'll have honeybees that are able to live in hollows of trees and stuff like that. And we, because we're gardeners and we're creating this ecosystem here, we have honeybees in Langstroth hives, and we manage them, and they help the vitality of the land as well, and increase the yield from pollination.
So I love learning about that point, because I didn't know that, it makes sense to me, but I just didn't know that there were some other invasive species or bugs that if there's too much honey, that they can come in and then destroy the hive. So you're saying without the human intervention there, that it's more likely that other species, at least on Hawaii, it might be different in other parts of the world, but that they can come in, and then that makes the population of the bees decline.
Well, there's a natural ebb and flow of population. Depending upon how much nectar and pollen there are. And then, it's those varroa mites and hive beetles are on the continental United States too.
Okay.
They've been there for a couple decades, and we've been dealing with them for quite some time. But here in Hawaii, they just got here about 8 years ago.
So if someone wanted to beekeep and just, set up the hives and have the bees and not take the honey or the wax, is that something that you would recommend for people, or does it really need to be maintained in your opinion?
I wouldn't recommend that. If somebody wants to do it, they have full freedom to do that. They're going to end up with a hive that will only live maybe a couple years in that situation. There are always outliers where a hive will be able to thrive without any human interaction. They live in caves and stuff like that, but they're not in boxes in that situation. They're in caves hanging from the top of the cave, or in the hollow of a tree hanging, or here in Hawaii they can be underneath a tree branch. And what will happen when they'll naturally shed the honey, and it will fall off of the cave or the branch or out of the hollow of the tree, and then animals will eat it. So there is that natural cycle too, which happens here.
Yeah. Great. So when you do take the honey or the beeswax out of the hive, is it possible that bees are harmed? Because that's one of the big concerns. When I was asking some vegans about this, they say, is it possible to do this without one single bee being killed, right? So I'm really curious about the answer to that, as well as do you leave enough honey to ensure that the bees have the food for them, especially in the winter when, as far as I understand, that their production goes down?
Yes. Yes. So yes, it's 100% possible to harvest honey without killing a bee. When we work with the honeybees, we don't wear veils, and that gives us a closer interaction with the honeybee and actually forces us to slow down. When you put the veil on and suit up, you can be a little more clumsy with the bees and accidentally end up killing some. And there's like a barrier between you and the honeybee. When you don't have that barrier, they're more slow and more intentional and more methodical. And we only harvest about 10 to 20% of honey at a time from the honeybee, from the beehive. So we'll very slowly take out a frame and brush it off. We use rosemary to brush off the honeybees and let them go back into their hive. So we have a no-kill effort when we harvest honey, and also to the point of leaving enough honey on the hive for the bees to survive during the low nectar flow season. Yeah, we do that by only harvesting about 20% of honey max at a time.
Okay.
It's important for us to leave honey on the hive because the honeybees work so hard to get that, and that's their food. So we've also kept bees, so we do have them familiarity with the overwintering the hive. And our philosophy was always we would leave at least 100 pounds of honey on the hive overwintering, and that was basically one large box of honey full for the honeybees to eat over the winter. Not only does it provide them the food, it's insulation. It keeps them warmer in the wintertime. And a lot of beekeepers, what they'll do is they'll harvest everything in the autumn, and then they'll put a box of sugar water on the top. And no, that's awful because the honeybees aren't designed to eat sugar water. It gives them all sorts of diseases. It'd be like eating McDonald's every year. It's
right.
awful.
And that's what most beekeepers do in the industry at large, right? So are there any other points that you want to add about what makes you different as far as your sustainability and stewardship efforts? You mentioned you don't give them sugar substitutes, you don't use the plastic, a few other things about how much you take. Are there any other practices you use here that are very different from the industry at large?
Yeah, we put the honeybee first. It's our goal is to have healthy honeybees and increase the population of healthy honeybees, because that the industry for decades, almost a century, have been doing it all wrong. From breeding queen bees, they artificially inseminate queen bees to get the genetics that they want instead of allowing them to swarm and allowing the virgin queen to go fly on her maiden flight. And we allow them to do that. That makes for a stronger colony because you're going to get the drone that flies the fastest after the queen to mate with her. Yeah, we put the honeybee first and look at their health and what is best for them instead of profits. So if we have an order for honey and the honeybees don't have enough for themselves and to fill the order, then we'll put it on hold until they do have enough. We don't put money before honey.
Yeah.
So that's just it's a byproduct. It's not from a healthy colony. You are going to have byproducts, things that are excess, because honeybees they put up enough honey for themselves and extra for just in case. And we can take off that extra, and they still have enough to be healthy.
Such a deep topic. There's so much that goes into every little detail.
Yeah, I've been keeping bees for 12 years, and I'm like just at the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that is involved with honeybees. Yeah. And the one thing that I find really interesting or really just intriguing and like fulfilling is when you eat honey. You're like eating all of the trees and a little bit of all of your ecosystem. You're connected to that. It's like you have that connection to your ecosystem, that direct connection to the trees that are flowering around you, and you can just eat honey and not think about it. But when you have that intention, that reverence too for the honeybee, then I think it brings it to the level of vegan, where you have that awareness and respect and reverence for the honeybee and what they do.
I love that. And I have heard that that's a way if you move to a new place, for example, if you're traveling and you get a little bit sick because you're in a new environment, that by taking some local honey actually helps you acclimatize to that environment because, like you said, you're getting actual nutrients from that environment into your body. So I think that's super fascinating.
Chicken skin figure out the stuff when you get to those different types of levels with beekeeping and honeybees, and how they're such an amazing animal, and we really need to save them and have respect for them, and we have a symbiotic relationship. We need them just like they need us. We need that interaction, that human honeybee interaction. Our population wouldn't be what it is right now in the world without them.
Awesome. Well, I have one more question for you. If maybe it's already been addressed, but for any vegans watching right now from home who haven't wanted to consume honey, do you have anything that you'd want to say to them about, like your final words or anything that you'd like to say to people at home watching this?
Yeah, sure. If I'm not pressuring you to try honey. It is delicious, or even beeswax products. They're really important, very healthy for us. If you do want to try them, make sure you talk to your beekeeper and find out what their practices are. If they're using plastic frames and using any treatments and moving their hives, then I would stay away from that, because that's not an ethical beekeeper in my standards. But if the beekeeper is letting them build their own wax, leaving them in a space that has a diverse ecosystem where the honeybee can collect bunches of different types of pollen and nectar, then I would say feel free, because that's somebody that has a higher ethic that is keeping the honeybees, and that's what's important. I think that's where the vegan comes in. It's having a higher standard. It's taking the vegan philosophy and applying it to beekeeping in a way that is sustainable and with an appreciation that honeybees are essential for our food systems. I feel it's important to kind of engage the vegan community. I don't necessarily want to tell them that they need to eat honey or try honey. If they're inspired to, then by all means. And same with beeswax products. But what I think, the point I do want to get across is you need to activate vegans, because a lot of vegans are conscientious of animals and the plight of animals. And honeybees are one of those animals that are experiencing a lot of these negative effects with factory farming. And it's so easy to see a feedlot with the cows that are in such awful conditions, but when you see a beehive out in an orchard, it can kind of look beautiful, even though those honeybees are kind of being tortured. So we need to engage these vegans into contacting the farmers and our elected officials, and letting them know that it's very important for our ecosystem, our health, and the honeybees' health, that we have more diversified farms that aren't monoculture, more organic practices, or beyond organic practices, because the organic standards have kind of been watered down substantially. You can treat with chemicals 90 days before harvest or 60 days before harvest, all these standards. So I think it's very important to engage the vegan community and in supporting ethical beekeeping.
Thank you for adding that. That's a really important point. I know a lot of vegans want to know what they can do at home to take a stand on issues. So just by talking to their beekeepers and their elected officials, that's a great way for people at home to be able to take some action. So thank you for suggesting. Kevin, thank you so much for being here today. I know I personally learned so much, and it changed my perspective, and I imagine that there's many people watching this video that also now have a new lens to look at this topic with. So for those of you at home, we'd love to hear from you. If you could leave a comment below this video to let us know what your biggest insights were, and has your opinion changed on whether or not to consume honey. All opinions are welcome, but please remember to be respectful. Thank you.